Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I'm talking to Alberto Nunez from Team 3DMJ, a natural pro bodybuilder, coach, and educator. First of all, we talk about some updates from Alberto. Is he going to compete this year, next year? Why? And learn a bit about that and what his goals and ambitions are. Then also talk about the NPC's involvement in natural bodybuilding. They are normally just dealing with untested shows, but they're looking to get into some tested shows in the natural bodybuilding scene. And it's been a hot topic, stirring up quite a lot of conversation, and we get Alberto's thoughts. Next, we'll explore some valuable lessons he took from Kassem Hanson and discuss why knowing his body better, specifically the anatomy, has helped level up his training. We'll also talk about exercise technique, specifically how to maintain the ability to keep reps accurate when it's its hardest. And listening to your body is a topic that we generally cover, and it's quite an important topic, and we get a lot of insights into how you can learn to listen to your body better. Alberto has mentioned in the past that he'd wish he'd paid more attention to his body's signals. We'll dive into what he means by this with some specific examples to help you avoid similar mistakes. Finally, we'll discuss the importance of evolving your beliefs and learning as a coach. Alberto believes that every few years, coaches should reassess and possibly change their mind on various topics. As a reminder, guys, please do make sure to like, share, subscribe, give us a comment, give us a review. It really helps the podcast grow and us to reach a wider audience. If you want to take a screenshot, share it over on Instagram, tag myself and Alberto, it would be highly appreciated. Thank you so much. So this episode is packed with insights and practical advice you will not want to miss. Whether or not you're a competitive bodybuilder, fitness enthusiast, or a coach looking to level up your game, there's something for you. So now let's dive into the conversation. So Berto, as we were just saying off air, whether or not you're competing this year, it was something I was very interested to kind of hear about. And so let's dive into it. When are you next stepping on the bodybuilding stage?
All right. So yeah, I decided about it's almost a month ago now that I wasn't going to compete. And I think everything was pointing at that. It was going to be a strictly business type of experience where I'm going to qualify for Worlds, then do Worlds, and that's kind of it. And like, preps shouldn't be that way. Like, there's that show in Dubai, for example, that logistically just wouldn't work out this year. And if I go to Dubai, like, I want to enjoy the experience, or some other, like, I try to do one international show. Well, that's what I'm going to start doing moving forward. And yeah, you want to enjoy that because the time on stage is like a small fraction, right? And part of it is the day before, meeting all these people or re-meeting, catching up with old friends, things like that. And it wouldn't be about that. My heart would be somewhere else. So yeah, we're not prepping this year.
Was there any kind of key thing that meant that it was going to be delayed? Or rather, why was it going to have to be business this year as opposed to, I guess, pleasure?
Yeah. So the raising of a human, especially the first year, it's just a lot more of a volatile time than I think I even predicted, especially as involved as I choose to be. So there's a lot of moments that I wouldn't get back. And while, I'm running out of preps realistically, or that's something that, beyond a certain point, you start thinking about, it's like, which one? And it was a very, very easy choice to just like put it away, focus on like what's taking place this year. So that was a big one. And then also I believe November, I'm going to be moving most likely, but it's not moving far away, just somewhere in this town. We haven't decided yet. So it would be like I'm doing Worlds and I'm moving. That's just not a good mixture. So next year there'll be more peace, and by then more time will have passed by. Ideally, if I stay healthy, will be an even better product. So there's a lot of pros that came along with that decision from a purely bodybuilding centric perspective.
I think it's really nice to hear about because I think some people struggle with the idea of delaying, and I don't know who specifically said this first, but I'd credit probably you guys at 3DMJ in saying the stage is always going to be there. And like, if you don't compete this year, it's next year. It's not like it's, if you've don't do this year, it's completely gone forever. And obviously there's elements of, like you said, you're getting to the age of where like you competing at your best might, I don't know how long that's going to extend for, but I absolutely respect obviously bringing in a child into the world and moving. I believe moving, at least I've heard this, is in like the top 5 most stressful things to do in your life. And then having a child definitely is, especially the first one. So when stress is that high, even for someone who's experienced as you are, the stress of prep would still shadow some of that.
Yeah, yeah. And you just can't absorb stress as well when you are prepping. Yeah, it was easy. I kind of knew it was coming, but I kept delaying it so that, yeah, just more time would pass by. Maybe the situation would have changed, but then it just gets to the point where, at least now, I feel like, okay, I am so far gone, like into the off season, where there's no way I'm prepping this year. Like if I did, it'd be a very bad rushed product. So uh, I said that I wouldn't prep a month ago, but like now it's like it's final. It's like, okay, you can't take back that decision. You can't time travel, Bert. So yeah, living good now.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. Sometimes you have to make the decision, and then initially it's uncomfortable, but once enough time has passed, you're like, well, I can't do anything about it now, so that's fine.
Yeah,
Actually, I do this
yeah,
with caffeine now and then, where it's like, oh, maybe I'll have another serving of caffeine, and then I'll wait an hour, and I'm like, well, it's too late now, and I'm like, great. So it's just lots of it's times that can happen. So with next year, what's your kind of goal? What for you is like what you're looking to achieve from your next contest prep?
man, I haven't thought about that a whole lot yet. Um, it's people always think about the bottom line first, like they want to do better, like per placings. But bodybuilding's a funny sport. If you want to win, like this is the wrong sport, right? It's like go do something. You could join a bowling league, and you can more objectively win there. Um, you know, um, like you can win in bodybuilding, but you regress as an athlete, like big time, right? And so to me, uh, it's crazy. Every sort of objective one I've had, not objective per the subjective sport of bodybuilding, it was rewarded with a good placing. All I could dwell on was the where I came up short and why this isn't as good of a product as it could have been. Um, like my first win, same thing. My last win, last time I competed, same thing. Like there's always something. I'm like, no, you don't get it. I can do better. And I don't know if it's a coping mechanism that I have developed because it's a very volatile sport, right? It's you win based on other people's opinion at the end. So I don't have anything I think concrete when it comes to placings. I think I used to put a lot more weight on, hey, let me get a world lightweight title at some point. But I know if that happens, like I'm gonna look at the lineup and I'm gonna be like, all right, well, all the players here that I want to play with. So yeah, I want to keep improving. I want to have um a better prep when it comes to the art I present at the end, but also when it comes to how I behave as I go through the process. I think that's very key. Um, so somewhere along those lines, better product, and then a better version of myself navigating through life and prep as I go through the process. But yeah, it's just a weird sport, man. So when people get butthurt when they like don't place well, I, I'm like, first of all, most of your success is going to be like determined by genetics. Like no one wants to hear that, but like that's how it is. And just because you have bad genetics for the sport, like it doesn't make you a bad person. Think of dogs. Like most of us are at some point have fell in love with a dog that's just, in our opinions, like the greatest dog in the world. but like per this arbitrary standard at a dog show, it's like, oh, it's a very poor example of the German Shepherd, right? Whatever. Like you can have good genetics when it comes to bodybuilding, but maybe you have, I don't know, like bad genetics when it comes to some underlying diseases that you're prone to having at some point, right? So yeah, it's just so genetically predetermined. Like I've seen homeless guys that look better than like 95% of people who are like trying really hard. And like these are people who are, I know they were homeless because they used to roam around my neighborhood as a kid, and it's like he's been homeless for 4 years. Like he doesn't have somewhere to live, much less a gym membership and enough food, right? So at the end, it's a sport that should be come from a personal place. So yeah, that's a long rant, Steve, but
No, I
I
like it.
guess
It was
it's
there's a lot there that we can kind of dive into. Actually, I always think about the funny on the genetics thing. Calves are the best example of it. I literally remember the other day I was walking behind some guy. He was walking his dog. I was walking my dog. And he just had these amazing calves. I mean, he probably doesn't think they're amazing. He probably thinks, why have I got such big calves? And the rest of me he's just an average like dude who doesn't really lift. Maybe he does train, but he's not like a bodybuilder. And I'm walking behind him and I'm like, man, if we're both in like long sleeve t-shirts and we've got shorts on, he probably looks more like the bodybuilder than me, because my calves, although I train the hell out of them, they don't look anywhere near as good as this guy's. And you see examples like that all the time. And it actually reminds me of the kind of homeless person with better genetics. I've been to shows. I remember specifically one show where some guy was like, he came in, he was like, is this where the bodybuilding show is? He rocked up. He didn't have a tan. He didn't have posing trunks. He just like rolled up his boxers, and he ended up winning his class, going into the overall. And it was just like, he was wildly underprepared versus many other people there. But he just had this card he was dealt with at birth that just meant, hey, if you do a bit of weight training, you like you look at your food a little bit, you can go take some bodybuilding shows. So these things happen.
Yeah, it's just a great way to pass time while you're here on Earth, right? And just here, paint your stuff, and if people like it, they like it. But there's just so many more valuable things that you can derive from this hobby outside of just like the placings. So
yeah, I think that's really well said, because even for myself this season, I have the objective, like if someone was to ask me like, what are you trying to do? If I think about like an outcome, I would love to turn pro. And the thing is, it's completely out of my control, and I could go pro card hunting. It's something I've considered, like pro card hunting. People talk about it. I'm like, but that's simply just trying to find a stage where someone better didn't turn up. Whereas if I just go to the shows I'm kind of planned in to go in, like I know they're going to be very competitive, and maybe my chances aren't as good. So I to and throw with this, like, do I want a pro card for the sake of it, or do I want to earn it against the hardest like place I can get it? But am I actually going to eventually even get that card? And then you boil all that back down to, why did you do this in the first place? And you said it has to come from that intrinsic place of kind of bettering yourself, and you enjoy the ride in a sense, and managing that process better than ever. And that's something I'm already taking value from this time around.
yeah, and you're at a wonderful place, Steve. I posted something about you on, what is it, Threads, like when it comes to like the
Oh yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There's just many, I guess, pseudo plateaus or natty limits that I've seen you arrive to, like over the years since I've known of you and your bodybuilding, that this is where a lot of people would have been like, that's it. I have to turn to like pharmaceuticals. That's the only way I'm going to progress. And you figured out a way. And I think a lot of this is attributed to how strategically open-minded you are when it comes to your bodybuilding. And there's a lot of folks out there, they still live in that fantasy land of like genetics. That's just something that someone with no work ethic, like, fabricated. That's not how it works. It's like, bro, you have no idea. But with you are like it's like the right combination of, it's like, okay, I understand my strengths, my weaknesses, and I know what is good for Steve. It doesn't mean I don't have great expectations for Steve, but like we have it's the goals are very ambitious, but they're very appropriate. And that's a hard balance to strike. And I know that for myself, the moment, well, right around the time that I came to realize like what I am genetically, it was almost liberating in some ways because I'm like, okay, that's an obnoxiously like dumb goal. Like you're just going to waste time with that. But there's all these things here that are under your control that you have that are fairly reasonable and you might spend a lifetime chasing. So it's this fine like balance of like being both a dreamer and a realist. Right. And I don't know, to me it's like liberating the day you wake up and you got your, I don't know, your rating in the mail, like, okay, these are my genetics on the 1 to 100 scale. This is what I got to work with. Like, let's go. Right. I don't have to put this weird pressure on myself that it's either like Phil Heath, Ronnie Coleman, or bust. Because that's how a lot of people do this.
I really appreciated that, the thread you made, and because it means a lot that people can see that, because it is something that I've been navigating and trying to continue to work out what I'm responding well to, how to get more out of this. And it is a lot of time and effort that you have to invest into it. And I'm glad it pays off. And that's what I encourage other people to do, because I've definitely been there with that genetic card and having these preconceived beliefs about how much muscle I could grow and how I'm going to look. Like you kind of start with obnoxious goals, like you said, like, I'm going to be the next Phil Heath. Then you get into it and you're like, oh, this is maybe no. And maybe I'm like anyone who's looks better than me is on gear. Then if you continue past that, you start realizing, oh, if I just put in enough time and effort, maybe I can get close to where they were. And I've not got the same physique, but maybe muscle mass is not too dissimilar. I'm just built differently. And so then you kind of then have this open mindset to what could happen. Could I achieve more? And I think once you get to that kind of land of understanding, then it just becomes way more enjoyable than all that confusion beforehand. But it takes a while.
Yeah. So there was a lot of highs. Like you were like, okay, at this rate after newbie games, I'm gonna be Jay Cutler in 5 years. But then those lows happen too, where you're like, is this even worth it? Right? Like, could I be investing my time in something else? And I think this is why the pursuit of natural bodybuilding is probably the safest way to go, because what enhanced bodybuilding allows you to do is you can skip over people that you have no business skipping, right? Like I'm pretty aware of like what bodybuilders out there are like within my range. Okay, these guys here I can't touch. On my best day, I can't touch. But then there's these other guys here that it's like, okay, they're a little off, and I'm on. I can tag them. But what enhanced stuff lets you do is like you can skip over people. Like you can skip over people, and but it comes with small print, obviously, right? So like if a lot of people, I feel they catch the inspiration to go enhance when they're kind of in one of those, like, but they're not fully like having the whole conversation with themselves, where it's just like, bro, like you do know that, okay, these people with like really good genetics, if they use the same stuff you use, like it's going to be the same situation, just as a different set of characters. So remember, this was years ago. This was a trainer at a gym. It was a commercial gym, but he was like, dude, he was just jacked out of his mind. Turned out he was a former Jamaican sprinter. He got into low bodybuilding and just very direct. I remember him telling me, he's like, I think the only way you can justify going IFBB, he's like, you have to be able to get to like around the first call out, like drug free. And if you're not there, you're going to be banking on some like crazy response to drugs, which is like pretty unlikely, like in itself. But if you can't do that, like drug free, just don't do it. So again, like there's just many of these like peaks and valleys that I know that I had to go through to get to this place where I'm at peace with my bodybuilding. And like one of those low points with drugs, holy crap, dude, like that wouldn't have turned out well, at least not for me.
Yeah, I think the same way, because I think about it's not an obsession with natural bodybuilding, but from the outside in, it might look that way. Like I do a lot in my life to propel it forward, but lots of those things are just healthy things to be doing anyway.
Yeah.
So with natural bodybuilding, it's just like years of very good kind of healthy habits in many ways. But if you go enhanced and your goal is to get that pro card, then you might do some things, and you're probably guaranteed to do some things, especially if you're not genetically well endowed, that would not be good for your health and may take years from your future as well. So yeah, I had that realization with my natural bodybuilding recently, where I'm like, hey, it's like I'm happy investing this time and effort into it, because virtually everything I'm doing is complementary to my life and longevity as a whole.
Yeah. And while the gains slow down, there's like this inverse relationship between the insight that you receive when it comes to yourself, right? Because you have to really put the reins on Steve, like in order to like and avoid pulling Steve's and guiding Steve into like the right places to make progress from like this point on. That's hard. That's hard. So you might get, I don't know, like from this point on, maybe 3-4 pounds of muscle, like in the next 2 decades, but like how much you're going to grow as a person, trying to figure that out, that you can't put a value on that, man. You can't. That's why everyone needs like this one, just one thing in life, like to kind of hold your attention so that you can uh, grow wise through and yeah, just live a better, sound, more holistic life. So yeah, Steve, like again, like great admiration for what you've done, because you've done a good job of not getting in your own way. And I think that is what I think most of us can look back at our lives, and that's what as a whole like stops us from getting to places that were a possibility at some point.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that, and I haven't been great at it the whole time. There's definitely times I've got in my way, but you eventually hopefully navigate it, and you get out of your way there. And I think that's a beautiful way to think about it as well, in terms of, again, do I want to put this much time and effort into natural bodybuilding? Like you said, you kind of have to pick something. When I think about all the time that I'd have like open to do other things, I'm like, oh, what would I do? And I likely am not going to be genetically elite at anything, because we're all probably pretty average. So I'm kind of satisfied that this is the thing I've chosen, and I enjoy it. So I'm just going to go with that. So I think others can take that too.
Yeah, it's got to be the work that doesn't feel like working. That's I guess it's like a nice little adult playground in which for you to like grow and experiment and try things out, right? Things that they're important, but they're not important, right? So it doesn't have to be the thing you're like most genetically gifted. Like it's fine if you discover that, but I don't know. What if it blows? What if it's like Rubik's cubes for both of us, right? So yeah. Um, so yeah, man, I love where my bodybuilding is at right now. Like it's just in the right place, and it's crazy when I put it in the right place, and I'm like following the instructions when it comes to like how to water it correctly. It's like it's it kind of grows in ways that I wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago.
I love that. And I have a question on, this is kind of a bit of a tangent in some sense, but we've talked about enhanced bodybuilding, and I haven't heard your thoughts, I don't think anywhere, on the NPC entering the natural scene. I don't know if you have any strong thoughts surrounding it, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking about it, because I think it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, they have the budget, but I think without the right leadership, they're not a big threat, right? And at the end, it's like I can't even necessarily. I can't, or can I? I can't necessarily call them a threat, because at the end, what I want is just like I want a place for natural bodybuilding to exist, right? So if they end up doing it better, fine. But it's one of those things where I feel that it's almost like when your parents as a kid try to get you something for Christmas, right? That aligns with your hobbies, and you're like, oh, cool, thanks, mom. Like like you just don't understand the flavor and like what it is that we really do over here. So I I don't know how well it's going to turn out. They need a proper leadership, but I think in order for that to happen, they have to literally draft someone out of the natural bodybuilding pool and just be hands off and be like, all right, we trust that you know what you're doing when it comes to this, because we keep saying these awkward, weird, and clunky things. Because it's like one thing the NPC folks like legit don't like. Natural's natural, bro. Like we like, no, there is no SARMs. There isn't no like coming off as you get closer to like legit. Like we say we are what we say we are. Um, yeah, like the TRT thing. I've discussed this with Dave McConey before. It's like I want to, and maybe with you. Like it's like I want to
Yeah.
see this vessel like kind of fall apart,
Yeah.
and me like learn to like handle it as it happens, right? Because that's really going to test all that I have learned when it comes to this world. So I don't see it as a threat. I think a lot of people view me as like a secret agent for the WNBF, especially now that I was like
Yeah.
voted as, you know, the leader of the athletes. I've pissed off every federation at some point. Like at some point, I've said peace to the WNBF. I've said peace to the IFPA. I've said it's. I just go where the bodybuilding is good and where I think it's in the best interest of the athletes generally. So
Yeah.
so maybe they do it right. I don't know, but it doesn't look good right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting your framing of threat, but then you kind of thought about that word and whether or not is it a threat or is it, again, it kind of depends how they do it. So it'll be interesting. I think it could be a positive thing. I asked Dr. Joe Klemgeski, I always say his last name wrong, but I tried to, about this, and he essentially kind of fell on a rising tide brings up all ships. So potentially it could have that sort of effect. And he also said, again, they have like a 3-year drug-free policy. Maybe people will see that and be like, well, I've been natural like my whole like career. I'm not going to go with them. The WNBF are over here. They have a 10-year drug-free policy. That sounds much more legit, maybe better testing. So it could, hopefully it has only positive impacts on natural bodybuilding as a whole, and the organizations have been doing it and supporting naturals for so long.
Yeah, the 3-year thing, I get it doesn't, on paper it doesn't bother. I know there's a lot of research that right now, like that you've used before, and then like you've come off that it changes it. Oh no, like it is. I just haven't seen that in practice. Like for one, like it's just like these guys just don't know how to drive this vehicle anymore. Once they come off, it's like it frustrates me to watch, because I've known a lot of friends that have gone from like hyper enhanced, and they tell me the truth. They tell me everything because I'm not part of their inner circle, and it's just insane how much they can get away with. It takes them a good 10 years probably to like learn how to drive this thing again. No matter how smart they are, like that's they're like, oh yeah, I forgot that bit. Yeah, can't hack my way into this or that. So it's more of an ethos thing. I feel
Yeah.
like, like for us, it's like, okay, we're on the same page when it comes to this side of bodybuilding anyways. But like the 3-year thing, the 10-year thing, I just hope there's context there when it comes to like specific cases, because I don't have no issue with like some kid who maybe took SARMs when he was like 17,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, so you're not going to let him compete till he's like 27 for an error he made when he was like 17. Like that's a great way to lose athletes, to force them almost to go down a route that maybe they didn't want to go down, and maybe isn't the best option for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really well said. So looping back actually to, obviously, you feel like you're in a really good spot with your bodybuilding at the moment. And I think it's at least clear to me, and I have as well, taken some bits from Kassem and N1. And you had a really cool analogy where you said kind of getting that slightly deeper understanding of anatomy was similar to learning a bit more about macros. So rather than looking at like, I don't know, different foods and being like, oh, that's good, that's bad, or meal plans, you can like, actually, I can see through the matrix a little bit. Same with this. I'd love to hear what some of the key things, at least from spending time with Kassem, some of the stuff from M1 that has helped you get more out of your bodybuilding.
Yeah. Man, I don't know why it gets so much hate, like that trend to like just to learn stuff, right? It's like stop learning, start doing. Um, like this is what bodybuilders were hoping for forever, because you'd always hear them talk about angles this, angles that, right? You go look at what Charles Glass has been kind of doing on his own, right? Like in a more, I won't say less scientific, but he suspects that this is doing that, right? Like bodybuilders have wanted to go down this like rabbit hole for like years, it seems. And now that we've kind of formalized it and we've given it a little bit more of a, yeah, a nice scientific bedding in which to sit on, a better foundation. Like all of a sudden, it's like it's contagious, and it's going to turn you into like a, sub RPE 5 lifter for life. Um, so the freaks, like we said, they're going to be freaks. And what I think where I feel the people who this impacts the most are the people who are going to benefit from just taking a slightly more scientific approach. And to me, this stuff has been like, I've never really been into cars and gadgets and things like that. But like to me, this was like finally like popping the hood open. It's like, oh, okay, like this course had been available when I was like in high school. I would have been like right there. Like the homework would have been like, please give me more, right? So so yeah, it's just a great way to like pop open the hood, get a deeper understanding of a part of your bodybuilding world that's so important to your success, your training, especially is the more natural you are, and then as the more you age, because you can't just do like globs and globs of bad work and then eventually hope it amounts to something, which is what we all kind of start. So it's been helpful to me in that, hey, I get to nerd out when it comes to something that speaks very clearly to I guess the mechanical side of me that prior to this, like nothing had ever really captivated it that much. It's things that you can learn and then like go apply right away and see if it works for you. Like that is fun because a lot of learning isn't just watching, it's like going and like doing the thing. So um so yeah, um it's probably added a good decade of hard training to my lifting career. So as much as I opened up with that very that sad moment of like, I don't know how many preps I have left, Steve, but I don't know. Like I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years goes by and I'm like, bro, I'm better than my 40s, right? Like usually it takes some sort of like rogue athlete to set that bar to be like, hey, you don't have to decline. I'm not going to wait for that guy to show up. Like I want to be that guy. And I do think a lot of what I've learned here is helped me kind of cut out the fluff and extend my career.
I love that. Yeah, I definitely see the pushback against it, and often it is strawmans that are being created, and that's not, and they're also not trying it themselves. I think it's similar to the pushback, and I certainly had this pushback when I started to learn about if it fits your macros. I was like, oh no, surely I can't eat these foods and still get in shape. And then you try it a little bit, and you're like, oh, you know what? I enjoy my diet a bit more. I adhere better. Maybe the results I'm getting are even better. And it's similar here, where I started trying some of these things rather than just seeing, I don't know, someone I look up to poo-poos it and says, oh, you should just stick to these movements. Try it for myself, see how I feel about it. And I started to just embrace it and enjoy it more. And it's things like this that being open-minded to it. And like you said, be a good bodybuilder, continue to learn. Otherwise, again, like you wouldn't have had this extra decade that you can continue to train for. And it often is injuries that stop a lot of good bodybuilders continuing to grow.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we know, like we know that we're proud of, came from at some point having to throw away some other idea, right? Like at some point, like these concepts or these ideologies that they can be correct, whatever. Like at some point, like you with like the clean eating, for example, it's like you had to be proven wrong prior to that. So whenever something that an idea, a concept that I hold dearly, that's kind of high up there in my tree of methods is threatened, I'm like, oh, okay. Like it used to like, I guess, threatened me as a person. Now it's like, okay, who knows? This might be the next thing I need to know, right? So those big aha moments, usually prior to that, they come with it's a very quick gut punch, and you have to check yourself on that. So yeah, yeah. I remember my intro to Kaz was he was talking about scapular uh, pinning the scapula back when you are bench pressing, and it was just such a dogmatic thing, right? Like going around and not just bodybuilding, but primarily powerlifting. It's like, oh, keep those things back. And at first I was like, oh no, this dude's wrong. Like he's. And then the more I listened to it, got deeper into the video, and along the ways you have like hints and clues. I remember seeing Bryce Lewis, world class powerlifter, bench press. That dude didn't pin his scapulas back. He literally just grabbed the bar and just that was it. And at some point I wanted to question it, but you know how it goes, bro. It's like something is repeated enough by people you respect, by yourself. It just becomes something you can't question. So, yeah, crazy trend, man. The whole being anti-science. And the thing that troubles me the most, it's like genetically, like I know what I am. And most of these people poo-pooing them, it's like, bro, like I I could have whooped you at like age 18 when it comes to like bodybuilding, like 1 full year. Like you of all people, bro, and like should be trying to learn from like anyone and everyone, so long as the point they're trying to make sense. And that's how I take my bodybuilding, because there's levels to everything. There's people out there so genetically gifted that I am competing against that it's hard for people to quantify. The only way you can really say you understand what good genetics is watching someone is not seeing Phil Heath like just walk into the room like at his peak. Like it's like watching this individual like grow from the start, and you're like, oh, okay, like that is what a hyper responder is. Because it's one thing to see it, it's another thing to develop. And I think if people saw how a lot of these hyper gifted athletes got to where they are and at what rate it happened, right away they'd be like, okay, there's I what I can learn from this person outside of just being inspired to do good work today is highly limited.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We create the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Yeah, it's so interesting, this anti-science type of movement, because I kind of understand both perspectives to some extent. I don't know if you saw the post. I spoke about it with Pascal. It was from David Kay, obviously amazing natural bodybuilder here in the UK. And he was essentially, and I don't want to misquote him, but it was somewhat like, I think some of these guys are overthinking it. I think like you need to just go in there and work hard. Don't be so scared of like fatigue and all of these sort of aspects. And I definitely relate to it. But I also think there's a certain person who's drawn to trying to figure out this thing a bit more, and science is often the way to go. And it's like me, like yourself and the rest of the guys at 3DMJ. And it's people who are maybe not massively genetically gifted, looking for answers of how to do it better. So it's like this, it's not that it's science and science-based lifters, put it that way, lead to poorer physiques. It's that poorer physiques often go towards science for answers. And so there's this correlation of maybe lesser physiques drawn to it. But it's like, where else are we going to go?
Yeah, yeah, and with great power comes great responsibility. So I do feel like if you're genetically well endowed, it's like you need to think about what you say, because remember my first lesson in this was I had a training partner. All my training partners I had like just they got sick of me like 2 months in, but I had this one guy that kept showing up for 2 years, did everything I was doing, ate exactly how he was supposed to, and I remember I'm like, this ain't working, bro. Like this is so bizarre. And right then it hit me that okay, it's not because I work harder than most necessarily. It's because I think most of us who stick to this is because there's something about it that felt like natural and good, and we excelled at it to some extent right away. But you have these hyper elite bodybuilders telling you like, you're wasting time like thinking about these things. It's like, bro, you just don't know. It's not until you've worked with a lot of athletes that you really can understand that, oh shoot, like there's so much it's like man, I think the dog is the only thing that kind of vary like well more obvious variation than like human beings. It is insane. So yeah, yeah, like you're gonna turn to science some way. Like people either turn to science when it comes to they go find an Eric Helms or they go find SARMs or steroids, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the solution ends up being science at the end, right? So a lot of these guys that are telling you like like F science, don't think about it. It's like, bro, where did that bottle of test come from? Like some pencil neck made that, right? So yeah, yeah, strange world, bro, where we're encouraged to like not think and kind of like yeah stumble and flop. Like who cares? Like that's part of the learning process, right? We got a lot of things wrong before we got to where we are at right now, and we're probably doing a lot of things right now, you and I, Steve, that 3 years from now we'll be like, oh shoot, like that's embarrassing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you actually said this on a recent podcast for the 3DMJ podcast, where you're like, if you aren't looking back as a coach over the last few years and thinking, oh, damn, like I was a bit off there, or I've changed my thoughts on that, then that's not a great sign. Like it's a sign that you're not progressing and you are a bit dogmatic. Because, yeah, I think about this specifically. I remember I did a post on my bent over row. I was like, if I looked at my bent over row today, 5 years ago, I would have been like, Steve, that's sloppy. Like, what are you doing not coming all the way to your stomach? I'm like, yeah, but now I know, hey, there's something right about that exercise technique. So we're refining and learning as we go and getting a better feel for these things. Or like protein. A lot of people are doing like 6 protein feedings. The more, the better. And then John Tromlin comes out with his like, hey, we just get more MPS and it lasts longer and you can do like way less feedings. You total protein for the end of the day is what matters most. It's like, oh, damn. Like I thought all those efforts were going to the right place.
So like I'm very pro science. Like some of my mentors, like if I were to show the bros at the gym like who they are, they'd be like, really, like, dude, like this guy's got jorts that talking about Lyle McDonald, right? That one bro his picture we all know of that exists out there on the internet. But at the same time, this doesn't discount like experience either. Like who is your coach, right? You hired Cliff because okay, when it comes to playing this game in particular, this bodybuilding, okay, he's a coach. He's really good at playing this game. He understands the rules. He understands how to win. So they're different things, right? But the best coaches are the ones that know where when like their expertise kind of runs out, and it's like, okay, let me outsource and like learn from these folks because they can probably clue me in a lot better. So and that's why Cliff is so good at what he does. Like there's certain things that he says that I'm like did you science guys catch that? Like someone needs to like study this, right? But also like he learns from them just as much as they might learn from him. So so both worlds can coexist, I think. And if you are kind of scanning both sides. Like I think this is how not only do you stay up to date, but potentially you're going to be a little ahead of everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. I think it is that it isn't one like camp has it right. It's that they need to coexist, and there's somewhere in the middle where you probably want to land, because I know I've been both in my head in the sand in both directions. And like you said, the results I've had recently have been because I've been able to kind of meld it towards the middle, because you can ignore what's going on here and you just, I don't know, new paper comes out and you're like, oh, I don't know, 52 sets. I'm only doing 8 sets for my quads. Oh, I need to ramp that up. It's like, do you though? Like, do you know what you're trying to achieve? You know, like, look at your logbook, look at how you're responding. And people forget that, and they're looking towards science to give them that like pinpoint answer. And I think that's when they get in trouble. But then again, to completely ignore it and not learn the lessons that it's providing us in like very kind of clear settings, controlled settings, not just anecdote, is valuable as well. I know you've mentioned before that you wish you'd listen to your body a little bit more. Does anything specifically come to mind when you think about, I wish I'd listened to my body a bit more in this example?
Yeah, I do. This was something I haven't had the time to put the thought like in sometimes like going on, whether it's Twitter or even a reel, or the threads, like part of the wonderful exercise and trying to, people like they hate on the short form stuff, but like if you really know your stuff, like you should be able to do that. So I like taking this vast jumbled concept and being able to like, okay, like turn it into something useful that really expresses what I'm trying to say. So this thought, although not pure, I have thought about a lot recently, and this is that, so the entry to becoming just proficient in something to being good is going to be learning how to work hard, right? Like you think you're working hard, you're actually not, right? Like it's crazy. Like seldomly do I see any gym rats. I'm like, yes, I respect your work ethic. I think you're a hard worker. That hardly exists. So there's this threshold of like, you have to, when you think you're working hard, you're probably not working as hard as you think. And working hard, I don't mean like throwing weights around, grunting. It's a collection of things. It's like, how focused are you, right? How is your decision making within a set? It's multifactorial. Okay, that's the first thing you learn. But then what ends up happening is once you kind of have that like honed in, you tend to rely on it way too much. So whenever you find yourself in a threatening situation, you're not progressing in the off season, you're 8 weeks out and you feel a little behind, what ends up happening is that this kind of becomes your blankie. This makes you, when in doubt, just flail, just hit it with everything I have. So what a lot of people don't get about elite level bodybuilding is, or just any sport, is that a lot of these athletes, things they do, sometimes they're confused as being lazy, but in reality, like hyper elite athletes, what they do really well is they know how to listen to their body quite often, and they know how to conserve energy. So they know how to work hard, but they're also really good at like understanding context and picking their spots. And that's something that a lot of bodybuilders, because the sport's kind of built on this like Puritan work ethic, right? Like look at the Flex magazine. Like if it was, I don't know, there was a guy meditating on the cover, no one buying that back in the days, right? Guy getting spending time with his girlfriend in a patio, no one's buying that. So learning to conserve energy and when to strike is probably the last thing bodybuilders learn, and it's what's stopping a lot of folks, especially the sub-elite athletes, from getting to that next level. Is learning how to pick your spots.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. And it relates to something else I saw you post about. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but in terms of exercise technique, you kind of had this, where was it? So to maintain the ability to keep reps accurate when it's its hardest. That's and you talked about this flailing. That's something I see with less experienced kind of trainees. As soon as it gets hard, like they could be a 5 RAR and they're just like, oh, this is uncomfortable. They start, their technique breaks down. But you can see it, and you had the post, I think you had Dirk on there as an example, and yourself and like Jeff Alberts, and kind of as you get into those really hard reps, that's when you have to, I always think of The Rock. He used to do this like reel where he'd go like, focus. I'm like, you couldn't be less focused on that exercise when you shout focus, but I know what he's saying. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like, you have to, that's when you switch on, is when you get to those like quote unquote effective, highly effective reps. And yeah, I think that's a big skill in itself, and to be able to do it in a way that doesn't injure you, but you still get kind of the stimulus you're looking for.
Yeah, it's like you bring up Dirk and Jeff, and it's a example that you can kind of play off is for example, if normal people find themselves in a physical altercation, right? Like what happens? It's like the heart is racing, like they don't really know what to. They're shaking. They've lost all coordination. They've lost all grasp on like time, and there's right. So whereas someone, I don't know, who's a trained fighter, right? Like maybe they do a little MMA, right? A little striking, a little grappling. Like this is just another day, like for me. They're calm. They're like, all right, this drunk dude at this bar wants some of me. Pulse hardly changes, knows exactly what he's going to do. And that is how I think if that's the goal once you've trained long enough. It's like, it could be a PR, but if you trust all the preparation that like led into this hack squat set, it's like you conserve energy, right? You only let your heart rate get as away from you as it needs to be, right? Your attention stays there. You don't need to psych yourself up, right? And that's something that guys like Steve, like Jeff, like Dirk, they do so well. They're on the apparatus. It's getting hard, and again, like normal people in a fight in the street, here come the punches, and they're like, all right, let me just like wherever they might land. Like Dirk and Jeff, Brian, I'd include in that. Like there's some killers. They're like right there, like Matrix stuff, like just holding that muscle to the fire. So I'm sure there's some people who can benefit a bit more than others from hyping themselves up and doing whatever it is they need to do. But I think generally speak, even if you are, it's like it's your best interest to like learn to like bring the energy down and only use as much as like you need to, because a hard set RPE 10 on the Cybex hack squat, right? If you're calm, say like Dirk, versus someone who like had to really will themselves to get that, it's just going to affect you differently, like when it comes to the post recovery period. And this will be even more obvious to you when you are in a place where resources aren't adequate, like a prep, right? A prep really makes you so transparent. So yeah, that's something that's been on my mind a lot of late, Steve, is that yes, we get better at creating plans that are, and plans like the training, the nutrition, how we move in the gym, that are much more efficient. But also it's important that we learn how to conserve our energy as we go through that process. And that takes many like shapes and forms, right? It can be the hyping yourself up before the set, or just like learning how to fully unplug from bodybuilding. I think that's my greatest thing. Like when I'm prepping, it's like I can literally put that away. I can put it all away. I can put it away the day of the show, the night of the show. It's again, it's learning to turn it on when you need to, turn it off when you don't need it. Conserving energy is probably the biggest thing that's stopping a lot of people in practice from getting to where they could be.
You mentioned that athletes are really good at that, and I don't know where I read it, but I have heard of this concept as well, where athletes are really good at like switching it on and off. And it makes me think of like Olympic lifting often. You see them go for their attempts, they're doing an attempt, and then they're immediately like calm, chilled, like in the back. But like you said, people are different in terms of how much arousal they need. I think of like Elaine Norton before a lift, or I think of Mike Tuchscherer before like a power lift, and like they couldn't be more like opposite end of the spectrum of how much like arousal they need, because I think we're all a little bit different in terms of that like bell-shaped curve, and you just kind of have to learn that for yourself and pick and choose your battles, I think is a good way of putting it. Because I think of it like caffeine. Like if it's an ergogenic aid, there's always a gotcha on the other side.
Yes.
You don't want to be using a pre-workout at the start of your, I don't know, in your deload, just like you wouldn't use arousal techniques at that time. But I don't know, if it's the last set before you're about to enter into a recovery period, yeah, maybe there you can kind of amp yourself up a little bit more. But again, it's on that U-shaped curve. If Mike Tuchscherer was to amp himself up that much, he'd probably throw him for that lift. And I know I've been there too, where you're so aroused. It's similar to that like fight. I was just thinking if someone tried to pick a fight with me, I'd have the same thing. Like I'd start sweating, my heart rate would be going. And if you have that for a lift, like that lift, it goes out the window. You can't even like contract muscles properly. It just feels completely off.
Those good PRs, those real good PRs, that not only were they good PRs, like you executed the way you wanted to, but on the other side, recovery went quite smooth. You know, like it was just smooth, like the whole way. Like there was no part, nothing in your mind, or maybe there was, but generally you felt very well prepared as you were going through the process. So I think sometimes a lot of people, they do have to like overly rah-rah themselves to make up for lack of preparation. It's something that it can work for a while, but eventually it'll run out on you. It will. But like the two contrasting points with like Mike and Lane, yeah, they could probably borrow from each other a little bit, you know? So like, so again, just a general observation, but yeah, rookies, they kind of waste too much energy. And I think that is like going back to your first preps compared to more recent preps, like how much more have you been able to conserve? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
For to be able to unplug, Berto, do you have any tips for that? Is there anything you've done? Because I know for myself, like the night before the show is typically when I get my worst sleep, and I'd love a way of being able to unplug and not kind of, I don't know, get as anxious about these sort of things. Is there any skill sets that you've developed that has allowed you to do that past just you're a pretty chill individual?
I think an easy one for most people in today's world is just get off your phone. But not necessarily the day before the show, because it's probably you're probably gonna be in some weird space in your mind where you're just thinking about all the things that can go right or wrong, right, over the next 24 or so hours. But yeah, I'd say giving your mind just like free range to just dissolve into nothing. Like for me, my cardio, I did that the other day. I'm like, oh, that's what this time was, because I don't allow myself to like hear music, to be on a screen or anything. No, there's no expectations. I'm just kind of there doing and existing. So I think, and thinking, like I'm there with my thoughts, right? So I think if you assign yourself, which again, it's just getting harder and harder to do, like these segments in time when you're not plugged into anything, and you can really just chew through thoughts, worries. Like, man, like people don't realize it, but this is what people used to do in their spare time, like a lot, like back in the day. And I realize this is important to me. Once I made Cynthia my wife, my training partner, because like for me, the drive to the gym was always no music. It was always just like, because usually my work day is wrapped up, and I'm just kind of rehearsing and thinking about just what's eating me right now. So yeah, just finding quiet time routinely is probably the best thing you can do or picking up a hobby that means little to you. Like, that's my cardio basically. So for me, it's cardio or drawing. I like to draw, and I'm not looking to get good at drawing. I'm just doing it. So yeah, just having some time to yourself, true time to yourself, I think is important. because it teaches you to unplug so that you can do it when it's like most important. So that night before a show, right before a big set, right before you have to get into that moment, like learning to turn it off and on, super important. Because as of right now, the only way people know how to do it is like, okay, this is how I do it.
Yeah, I know when I'm in trouble when I keep just like getting, I don't know, picking up my phone at times of which I shouldn't be. Like if I'm trying to get into like deep work, like check-ins and just get through them. Don't check my phone between every client check-in. God damn it, why am I doing this? And then I get frustrated. So yeah, little things like going for a walk without my phone has been helpful. Like I just like in my head, I'm like, that's time wasted. I could be listening to a podcast, or I could, I don't know, respond to some comments. Like, no, you're fine. You just take that. And I think it's similar to sleep. A lot of people think about sleep as being time wasted and I'll sleep when I'm dead. Whereas now it's like, oh, we respect that. We give ourselves time for that and we see the benefits. I think it's similar here where it's like, it's not something you need to do, it's something you don't need to do. And so it's hard to do that. But once you do it enough, like you said, you practice at it, it becomes like making sure you get your time in bed, and you're always going to respect that moving forward.
Yeah. That's why the whole bodybuilding thing, man, like, especially the drug-free bodybuilding, a lot of people worry their kids get into it. Like, bro, that's what a wonderful hobby. Like send him off to college and he's prepping his food for the week and going to bed at 9 p.m. on a Friday. So yeah. Learning to unplug. It's a plug in and plug back in. I can be present. That's so important. So important. And then I guess also like not being fearful. It just is what it is, right? Yeah. Whether you get the PR or not, whether you got the win or not, just part of your experience, take something from it and move on.
Yeah. I think that's a great philosophy. Berto, to finish with your kind of now you're competing next year, what are you looking to do with your bodybuilding over the next months? Is there any specific things you're working on to set yourself up for the best season possible?
Let's see. So my setup will be better, I think. I'll probably start about 12 pounds off from stage weight once. So that'll be nice. So yeah, I still believe that like the whole system of like setting yourself up like from a good place, like what is your fighting weight in the off season versus like where you start a prep can be very vastly different things. But as time goes on, they might be a little bit closer than you think, especially as you kind of learn to cut the fluff in your methods and in life, right? So yeah, I won't get too heavy. I think that's important because some people will make progress, like, but it's like, bro, it's physics that doesn't necessarily follow the rate at which like muscles grow. I want to run a clean business, so I think I'm just going to gain 3 to 4 pounds from here until November, and then cut down from most of November, most of December, maybe part of January, get down to about 169, 170, and then hold it, or lean gain, you could say, and then scope out the season and give Worlds a try again, because it's, I don't know, it's super to me. It was so exciting to be the only American in my middleweight class last time I competed. I'm like, this actually feels like a world show. So yeah. Training wise, oh yeah, I'm training a little bit more, but that's just because that's how you make up for bad quality, because you do more, but you don't do two more where like you beat the crap out of the thing. So yeah, training on average 4 to 5 days a week right now, and I think it's already a much better physique. So I'm gonna keep doing what it is that I'm doing. There hasn't been too many aha moments. I have one, but I'm gonna wait a little bit before. Actually, no, because you know Cliff. So I can get your thoughts and opinions on this. So I have been running a slightly higher protein intake than I have traditionally. So closer to about 1.5 grams per pound. And I think this is something that's worth playing with, because what are the negatives, right? If yeah, I know I'll get poo-pooed by some of the science folks out there, but it's like, all right, if you can conceptually understand that some people do better with 6 sets of training, and then other people do better with 24 sets of training, right? And this is okay in your world. Why can't there be something like that when it comes to protein intake? So it's one thing I'm playing with, because I tend to have a body that is not very good at storing. I think I heard this concept first from your coach, Cliff Wilson. And it's funny, like sometimes people say things, they're like, I've seen it, but you actually took the time to put it into categories and create systems. And he described it as you have stores and burners of energy. And for me, I am definitely a burner of energy. Like I've had literally no body fat in my body since I was like 7 years old, right? So like my goal is never to get abs when I start. I was actually happy the day my abs disappeared, because I'm like, I'm getting somewhere, right? So I can gain weight, right? And then you have other folks like, oh geez, like I had a client many years back. His name was Smiley Elmore Jr., who just mountain of a man, whose body is just like, let me take everything around me and like store it, right? So for people like me, it might be something worth considering, especially, and I think it makes more sense in the off season. I think Cliff has seen some stuff work in a positive way when it comes to some positive outcomes when it comes to the higher protein intake. And I mean, it makes sense when like your potential for anabolism is much higher, right? Like you can repave streets when you are building, as opposed to like prep. It's like, oh, we can just patch this up, and that's the best we can do for the most part right now. So I've been playing with that. Again, like my body's incredibly wasteful. My first month after my baby girl Sunny was born, I was like 10 pounds over stage weight. Like it just, like that's what my body does. So see how it works. Digestion seems to be fine. I seem to be seeing some positive things, but again, everything works so slowly at this point that I just don't know. And there's some confusion, because now I remember last prep is the lowest protein intake I had ever used during a prep, but maybe it makes sense because it's like, yo, the ceiling isn't as high when it comes to anabolism. So a lot of questions, but I don't know, just having fun playing this game of bodybuilding that really doesn't matter. But boy, is it a great way to just pass the time. So that's what we're going to be doing between now and the start of the prep, just having fun with it, passing the time.
That's cool. Yeah, the high protein. Every time I post my check-in each week and I put my nutrition up there, I don't think I've had a week where someone hasn't asked, why is your protein so high, basically? I'm just like, hey, Cliff does that. It's his preference. It's what he thinks. He's seen great results with it, what have you. And I'm similar to you, Berto, where I'm like, I'm happy just knowing that like I'm meeting the minimum and it's not taking away from anything else, so it's not a problem. Similar to, I think you were quite early on with the length and partials. We haven't talked about that, but you took that on and started using them, I think, earlier than a lot of people. You've probably been doing them for a few years now. I know I have. I'm like, I'm happy knowing that the downsides are minimal and there could be upside. So I kind of like have that kind of optimistic, less like critical and skeptical and kind of late adopter mindset in some ways. Supplements would be a different thing. I'd leave those. Yeah. But these things where there's like the risk to reward is pretty marginal. I think it's a great way to go.
Yeah, it's like have fun, like play around with something. Like it's a great way to run these little experiments on yourself. To like Brian Bornstein with his I think he was training one arm for a minute. I'm like, I couldn't do that, but I'm so glad you're doing it and you're having fun with this. So that's a big part of this. It's just like throwing around ideas, seeing what happens. It's a safe space to do it, because like I keep saying, at the end, it's just bodybuilding. It's going to be very healthy and good for you at the end. And as long as you're doing a few basic things, it's like really hard to get it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Berto, this has been a really great chat. I think people are going to take a lot away from it. Thank you again for coming on. If people aren't following and keeping up to date with you, they want to follow your prep for next year, where should they be heading?
3dmusclejourney.com. Yeah, we got everything there, from like my IG, the other coaches' IGs, the 3D Muscle Journey Vault. It's like a one-stop shop. We're trying to make it like the place you go to before you get coaching, right? It's like, take care of these things, get all your prerequisites in order. Okay, you've ran all these things, have all these skills, understand these concepts. Okay, now you're just a better people, right? Because you know how it goes as a coach. It's like you get some people it's just like, oh man, we're gonna have to do just as much unlearning as we're gonna have to do lifting and eating. It's yeah. And I don't blame these kids. It's just hard. If you were to get on the phone today and like want to put on some muscle, lose some fat, oh my God, good luck to you, kid. So yeah, 3dmusclejourney.com. Everything's there.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that's linked below. And as I said, I mentioned the podcast, the 3DMJ podcast. I'll make sure I got the YouTube there too. If you're listening to this, you enjoy Berto, you enjoy the rest of the coaches chatting. So I'll make sure that's there too. And thank you again, Berto. And thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.